Hello everyone, Void here coming back at you all with another top 10 Commander video. This time we're going to be looking at the top 10 best Pillow Fort cards in the Commander format. Pillow Fort can be difficult to define, but for this video we're going to be dealing with combat, so anything that deals with removal won't be included. This is going to be ways to dissuade your opponents from attacking you, make yourself look like the least appealing attack target. So don't expect to see things like Privileged Position. While those do protect you in a way that goes well with the Pillow Fort strategy, Pillow Fort is most well known for preventing your opponents from attacking you. As always, let's start off with honorable mentions. Riddle Keeper, Kazul, Tyrant of the Cliffs, and Asperia, Supreme Judge. These all do pretty good things whenever your opponents attack you, or a Planeswalker if they happen to work that way. You get a benefit. If they attack you with Kazul, you can get tokens. If they attack you with Riddle Keeper, you just mill them, and with Asperia, you can draw a card. Those can be deadly depending on the situation, but they don't just stop your opponent from attacking you, because a lot of those situations they don't really care. You can draw a card if you want to, you can mill me out a little bit. I don't really care, I'm still going to attack you, and it's not going to stop lethal. If they can deal lethal to you, they don't really care about a minor drawback. So while they're definitely good inclusions in any sort of Pillow Fort strategy, or even other strategies, they're not just exclusive to Pillow Fort, they're pretty good in other decks. They just don't really do enough compared to a lot of the cards on this list. Now we also have cards like Baird from the new Dominaria set and Archangel of Tithes. These are both pretty good. They just work for 1 mana though, so you're going to see better cards on this list that are going to tax your opponents a lot of mana if they want to attack you. Now let's get on to the actual list here. Number 10 is Sandworm Convergence. This is pretty much a reverse Moat, if you know what that card does. This stops flying creatures from attacking you, and it rewards you by giving you some worm tokens at your end step. This is, however, a ton of mana, 8 mana to do this. It can be worth it in the right deck, but the only reason why it's number 10 is because of that massive cost. It's a brilliant card. Flying creatures are very difficult to deal with, and if you don't have removal, you want something like this to stop them. Number 9 is Michiko Kanda, Truthseeker, with an honorable mention, I guess you could say, to Phyrexian Obliterator. They do very similar things. She's obviously a lot easier to put into a deck. She's not 4 black. She doesn't outright stop your opponents from dealing combat damage to you, so that's the problem. If they can deal lethal, they're going to deal lethal. They do have to sacrifice permanents, which is a big deal. It's going to prevent them from wanting to go all out at you. They're going to have to sacrifice more permanents if they do that. So while it doesn't prevent our opponents from attacking us, she is a very good way of letting our opponents know that if they do decide to come at us, they're going to be losing some stuff. They're going to be losing some card advantage. Number 8 is Dueling Grounds and Silent Arbiter. I guess you could say this is more so for Silent Arbiter because he can fit into more decks. They do the exact same thing. No more than 1 creature may attack each turn, and no more than 1 creature may block each turn. This doesn't really do much against Voltron, yes, but it does stuff against pretty much every other deck where you have more creatures to worry about. If you have 1 decent blocker, you don't really have to worry about much of anything, and this is really what you want in a Pillow Fort strategy, preventing your opponents from attacking with a lot of the creatures they want to attack with, going up against tokens, any of those strategies. These cards pretty much shut that down. Number 7 is Peacekeeper. Very simple creature here. Has an upkeep cost that you have to pay or he's dead, but creatures can't attack. Pretty simple, but you prevent your opponents from really doing anything to you by doing this. They can't attack you. However, they can't attack anybody else, which is the reason why he's lower on this list. He would be higher if he prevented your opponents from attacking you. Believe it or not, that doesn't make you as big of a target. If nobody can attack anybody, suddenly you become a much bigger target. At least with certain cards that dissuade from attacking you, your opponents at least are able to attack your other opponents, if that makes any sense at all. If everybody at the table is prevented from doing one of the fundamental things of Magic the Gathering, all eyes are suddenly going to be on you. So if you want to go for something a little bit safer, you could go with a Blazing Archon. However, he costs way more mana. He's 9, but he does prevent players from attacking you, which is kind of what you want out of this card, but for all intents and purposes, a 3 mana creature that prevents combat from happening is pretty good. Number 6 is Solitary Confinement. Now this card in specific builds is devastating to have to deal with. Your opponents can't really do anything to you, but it's the perfect Pillow Fort card. If you're playing a deck like Zur the Enchanter, this is one of the eventual ones that you get out into the battlefield just to protect yourself even further. It has a huge downside if you don't know how to play around around it, but if you do, it is easily the best Pillow Fort card on this list. It is very situational, which is why it's kind of in the middle of the pack. Just so devastating. Number 5 is Sphere of Safety. This is situational, but it's always going to be at least one. It's always going to count itself as an enchantment, so you're going to at least be able to force your opponents to pay 1 mana. But if you have more enchantments, and you likely will, this has the potential to make your opponents pay way more for each creature they want to have attack you. This does see a ton of play in Pillow Fort strategies because in a lot of those same decks, you're playing a ton of these other enchantments that do similar things. It's all going to stack over, so if you have things like Propaganda, Ghostly Prison, this is just going to make the situation even better for you. So while it is situational, depending on however many enchantments, it could be worse, it's not going to do nothing, which is the important thing to note here. Number 4 is No Mercy. This does have the drawback that I mentioned earlier with Michiko Kanda, where your opponents can technically deal lethal to you and not really worry, but with No Mercy, this is going to stop most creatures from attacking you in a multiplayer game where they have to worry about your opponents. Sacrificing a permanent doesn't really do much to stop most decks. With No Mercy, those creatures are destroyed if they deal combat damage. So most creatures, with the exception of Indestructibles, are going to be stopped dead in their tracks. You don't want to have to run into a brick wall. Even if you are able to deal some damage, destroying those creatures usually isn't worth it. You probably want to find a way to deal with that enchantment first before you do anything else. And especially considering this is the only black card on the list, definitely deserves to be here. Number 3 is Crawlspace. This is an awesome artifact. No more than 2 creatures can attack you each combat. May not seem like a big deal, may not stop Voltron, but it stops, yet again, just about every other deck in a similar way that Silent Arbiter will. It's not a creature, so it's less of a target. Token decks that go wide in general, are going to be stopped, but there's so many decks that this can fit into, and it fits into just about every single Pillow Fort strategy, and auto-include into so many of those decks. Whether it's goblins, elves, vampires, there are a ton of decks that can get out of hand. You have to go up against those. Preventing all but 2 of those creatures from attacking you may not seem like a big deal, because while they can only attack you with 2 creatures, there are a lot of decks that don't want to just swing 2 creatures at you, so they might just not swing at you at all and swing all out at another opponent. For that reason, Crawlspace is usually pretty good, but again, you do have the downside of dealing with Voltron decks that just don't care. Number 2, this one is super expensive, but it definitely belongs at number 2. Moat from Legends, reserve list. Most people probably aren't going to be playing with this card, so I also mentioned Magus of the Moat because it's a much cheaper option and it does exactly the same thing. Creatures without flying can't attack you, which is just about the majority of creatures you're going to have to deal with in Commander, so downright preventing them from attacking you is a big deal. It's exactly what the card is. It's a moat, and if you're looking for more options, we have Teferi's Moat and we have Island Sanctuary. They do similar things, but they're just not as good. If you do have the money to spend on a moat, it's probably going to be money well spent. It's easily the best card on this list aside from Solitary Confinement. It doesn't really prevent your opponents from attacking each other like Peacekeeper, but it does prevent the majority of creatures from attacking you, because the majority of creatures in a given game are likely not going to have flying. So just a really powerful card, very good defense, sort of that Pillow Fort that we've been talking about this whole time. Number 1, if you haven't guessed yet, it is a split between Propaganda and Ghostly Prison. They're exactly the same thing, just one's white, one's blue. These are really here for just the ubiquity, what they represent to the format, some really awesome staples that you see in so many decks. They're enchantments, so they're harder to deal with than creatures. You have Windborn Muse, which does the same exact thing, but it is a creature easier to deal with. Propaganda and Ghostly Prison just work out so well in Commander because there are so many creatureless decks, control decks that depend on some sort of line of defense. These are usually the go-tos. When you first think of Pillow Fort, Ghostly Prison, Propaganda are usually one of the 2 cards that come up. These just perfectly represent the strategy, what you want to do, and usually a lot of cards like Sphere of Safety are going to go along with whatever strategy you do based around Propaganda, Ghostly Prison. They're just super efficient, 3 mana, and your opponents have to pay 2 extra mana for each creature attacking you, which is going to stop them from attacking you with most creatures. Just super simple, but these represent the list the best, in my opinion. As always, you guys have a wonderful day. Void here signing off. See you all next video.